Thank you, BBC, for this interesting article. Please, people, read it on the description.
Yes.
Now, neuroscientific research on monkeys is ethically troubling but vital. People, I think that you will have to read this, and I want to introduce this topic with one important concept that I talked about last week. That is the monkey sphere. I hope you like this. Look at it, it's beautiful. So, what is the monkey sphere and why am I talking about it? The monkey sphere, if you didn't watch the previous episode, is this idea that we social species tend to get people closer to us and we can care for a certain amount of people. In the humans, the number is 150 approx. But what happens when somebody who is from another race, from another religion, gets closer to your monkey sphere? You start appreciating people who are from that race, from that religion, etc., etc., etc. The idea of the monkey sphere talk about how we care for people that we consider closer to us. And the farther that people are from our monkey sphere, the less we care about them. And I have to mention the monkey sphere because I know that my opinion is not going to be popular right now. Because in this article we are talking about if either is ethical or not to experiment on monkeys in order to help ourselves, help humans with new cures. Guys, you have to read it on your own because there are a lot of stuff to analyze in here. But my opinion is that, guys, monkeys, I love them. They are our cousins, but they are very far from our monkey sphere. And other humans are closer to our monkey sphere, or at least personally, I feel it like that. So even though I have talked about how I hate when people torture animals, I'm against hunting, I'm against fishing, I'm against sports that use animals. And I do consider immoral working with monkeys, but I consider it even more immoral working with humans. And I could argue that it's also not very moral not to try to develop cures for terrible diseases that we have nowadays. So, yeah, I'm really sorry. I find this immoral. I find it terrible, but I think that is the lesser evil. And for now, it's the only way that we have to research this. The option would be to torture humans. And even though I do know a couple of rich guys who would be perfect for that, they are rich. They will never get there. So that is my introduction about this topic. That's why I feel that it's kind of justified despite being immoral. Nate, I know that you're going to be against me in this one, and I would love to
Yeah,
hear your
yeah, I
disagreement.
am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, I'm right in the middle because I can argue both sides and I don't have a really solid position. So I was gonna say, like, Nate, this is perfect because you two are on opposite ends of the spectrum. So I'm gonna
Wait,
step
wait,
back
wait, wait,
and
wait, wait.
interject when I feel I need to, but
Wait,
go ahead.
before Nate goes, please, guys, I'm not supporting this. I'm also in the middle, just like you, Laura. It's
Oh,
just that
okay.
I understand. Yeah, no, I'm not saying let's go experiment on monkeys. I think it's the lesser evil, but I don't support it. I mean, I hate animal torture. I'm against that. I just feel that it's kind of an almost an obligation, kind of, but of course I cannot support it. I think I just understand it. So yeah, that's it. Nate, all yours. It's all yours.
It kind of stuck with me how you said you're against hunting and fishing, but then experimenting on animals is the lesser of two evils in the same sentence. That those
Yeah.
two seem to be in conflict to me.
Well,
So, are you a
oh, sorry.
vegetarian?
No, I am not. I'm
So,
against
where do you
that.
get your meat?
Yeah, that's another thing. This is going to sound like an
That's a big
oxymoron,
thing.
but I've heard about ethical meat industry. I know it's really hard to achieve that, but there are laws that regulate that animals who are sacrificed they should not die in pain and they should live a good life. But that meat is more expensive. So I'm in a.
Well,
I know I'm walking on thin ice in here, Nate.
no. You know what? I actually like having conversations with people that I disagree with because it's more interesting than just being like, "Yep, you're right. Yep,
Oh
you're right.
yeah,
All
we do
right,
not need
let's
an
all
echo
march
chamber
into
up
Happy
in
Land."
here, so that's why this one was so exciting for me.
So let me tell you, Mateo, why I got into hunting. About 8 years ago, I saw a film on the conditions in factory farms, and it really changed the way that I eat. So I made a decision to buy as little meat as I could from a supermarket or from sources where I didn't know where it was coming from. I take one animal a year, I use it up, I give some to my neighbors. That animal has had a good life. That animal is killed humanely, butchered humanely, a lot better than these animals that are kept in factory farms. I get most of my chicken, eggs, that sort of thing from a little farm that's on my way to work. And so I agree with you when you say that we need to try to minimize suffering. And it's not financially possible for everybody to live a fully vegan lifestyle. It's not
Totally
even
agree.
like some people just don't want to, too, right? And, you know, I don't think it's unethical to eat meat. And I'm sure I'll get lambasted in the comments, but the other side of this is I do think unethical testing on animals is wrong. So let's just quickly draw a line that there is such a thing as ethical testing on animals and unethical testing on animals, right?
I'm sure we
There's
agree on that.
suffering, and then right, like there are degrees here. There's nuance to this conversation. I mean, if we're peeling their brains open and poking them with sticks, that's one thing, right? And if we're talking about this sort of experimentation that a country like China is likely to be doing, that they're going to be far less likely to be treating these animals humanely. They don't even treat their citizens humanely.
So
So
that is where I'm 50-50, and I'm gonna interject really quick.
sure,
That is
sure.
where my ethics, I'm on the fence because I don't like the idea of experimenting on animals, especially when they can't give consent and when there could potentially be suffering, right? As you said, there's shades of gray, so there could be definitely observations and experiments that can be done without any harm to the animal whatsoever, and that's another discussion to be had. And I think that there's an
Mhm.
argument for that, but what my first impression was is, you know, even if it slows down our progress, we need to really minimize how much we're experimenting on animals, especially primates, as we've already been able to show their level of intelligence is much higher than we used to think it was, and we're certainly potentially causing a lot of suffering. But when they talked about in the article, it talks about how Europe and the United States have such a high degree of laws protecting the suffering or against the suffering of animals that to allow other nations to do the research would undoubtedly increase the suffering that those animals are suffering because they don't have those same regulations. And that was a tricky one for me. It's like we could do it poorly and badly and unethically, but they could do it even more poorly and worse and more unethically. And so that is, I guess, where I think Teo might be coming from, where he says, like, I'm against it, but I kind of see the point of it, or I can see an argument for it. What were your thoughts on that? Because I got stuck there. That's where I was like, ooh, I can't pick a solid side one way or another.
That was a pretty easy one for me. I mean, China's doing it too is the worst excuse to perform unethical testing on animals that I've ever heard. We we have our laws in place
Mhm.
because we have a higher moral standard. We have values where we have our bigger in group, as Teo was saying,
Mhm.
right? We include primates, and then to a lesser degree other mammals,
Other animals,
and
yeah.
then to a lesser degree other living things,
Mhm.
and that's fine to have. Um, and the focus of this article seemed to be that we're going to lag behind in neurological research, potentially
Yeah.
military, potentially medical. And I'm reading this and I'm like, I don't really care if we're behind on some sort of
Unethical
weaponized
behavior.
yeah, like there's lots of other ways that humans have found to hurt each other. And like the writer of this article was kind of evoking images of some future state of like total war with mind control lasers being fired at our soldiers. And I think that was a bit sensationalist.
I don't yeah,
Um,
I must have gotten a
Yeah.
different focus because I thought it focused more on the medical aspect of, like, us being behind medically, and
it
Yeah, I
that
was
was
thinking
is
about the
it
where
was in
same.
there. It was
yeah,
sly,
I mean, it
but
was in there, but that wasn't I didn't pick up on it the same way that you did. But I will say that, like, that again is kinda where I get stuck because the point that the author made was that we're gonna still benefit from it. Like, we're gonna have the medicines, and we're gonna have the technologies, we're gonna buy it from China and all this other stuff. And that's it's like, ugh, that makes me really uncomfortable. Just like the factory farming, like, knowing that my meat comes from an animal that was raised in horrible, terrible conditions makes me not want to eat that kind of meat, right? So the idea that the research for this product that could be saving human lives was accomplished on the backs of the suffering of these animals. It also feels a little bit like I'm benefiting
Yeah.
from China and these other nations allowing these animals to suffer. So it's a
Nate,
tricky one.
Nate, what would you think if we could keep doing kind of those experiments, but minimizing at minimum the harm done to animals? Could that be a little bit better, or do you think that it's still not acceptable? Or I don't know if not acceptable is what you think.
Absolutely. Less suffering. Less suffering and slower progress is better than faster progress. And, like I've never been faced with a life-threatening illness, but like if I had, something like Alzheimer's and was offered a cure that would give me a couple more lives and I knew it came from unethical torture of animals, I don't think I'd make that trade. I've never been in that position, but I don't think I would make that trade.
I
I
question
really
how
don't.
many people really know though. Like when they hey, here's a pill or here's a treatment or
True, that
here's
is an excellent
you
point. That's
know?
it. I mean, few people source the technology that went into the development of their medical treatments. Few people source their meat, right?
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
Look at insulin. Did, did you know about the blue blood from horse crabs, horseshoe crabs?
no,
You
no,
need
Oh,
tell
like
me.
no, no, no. Yeah, you gotta
yeah,
fill us in.
Tell me.
yeah, you have to kill like 20 of those crabs that come from the Devonic. By the way, they are one of the ancient creatures that we have now, and they had to take a lot of their blood, so they had to kill them and let the blood drop and all of that. To make, I think, one vial of insulin. It was terrible. Nowadays, luckily, research has been done, and now insulin is made artificially. But in the
That's what
past, a
yeah,
lot
I
of
thought it was synthetic, yeah.
yeah, nowadays it is, but in the beginnings those people would have died without the horseshoe crabs dying instead. So is it ethical? It's really hard for me. So I've seen the
No,
progress. Uh, uh, it's hard. Sorry, it's really hard because
do
again again I don't want animals to suffer, but I want people to live.
I mean, crabs, monkeys, obviously there's a difference there. One has more potential for suffering, I think, especially when it comes to medical experimentation. I could be
At least in
wrong.
terms of what we know now,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that we certainly don't know everything about the experience of the various types of animals. But yeah, as far as we can tell, and as far as we've determined, primates are much higher on the spectrum of being able to experience and process those kinds of things. And we could be proven wrong a decade or 2 decades or 100 years from now,
Could be.
and we could have to eat our words, right? Um, one thing one thing that I think that the article got right, and I think Teo is kind of along these same lines, was that, hey, in the beginning, sometimes the research is done by questionable means or there's only so much we can do, but then eventually it gets to the point where we can use things like nanotechnology and scans and stuff like that to get this information where we don't have to probe a monkey or a human or anybody. So I guess my biggest question is, does that interim step have to exist? Like, do we have to probe monkey brains first? And like, but the probing of those monkey brains results in this better technology that allows us to scan our brains without probing? Or can we develop the technology to scan brains and just skip the probing altogether? Like, is that something that can be accomplished with human ingenuity? And I kind of suspect it could be.
Oh, I think I'm not sure, but I think that they mentioned that in the article that it was not possible because there is a lot that we still don't know about the brain. You can
Mhm.
kind of develop neurons and study them, but certain parts of the brain, that's not possible.
Not
Right,
Uh,
because
yet.
we don't
yes,
have the technology yet.
Not
Right.
yet.
So
Yeah.
so
exactly.
do we have to put it off a decade or 2, but then eventually do it without any harm to any other animal whatsoever?
That would be amazing.
That's
Ah,
what I was saying is I will take slower progress. I will take, China having a lead on mind control laser super weapons or whatever it was this author was trying to get at. I think we got a really different impression from this thing cuz he's just I don't know, there was a bit of fear mongering in there that
There
kind
was
of
definitely fear-mongering, and the whole idea is that one nation being ahead of another nation, it's almost like we are constantly at races with each other to be, like, the top nation in this and the top nation in that, And I think there's this idea that America has to be at the leading edge of absolutely freaking everything. And if that's true, we should probably start with our education system. And maybe
Yeah,
just maybe our economy. And then go from there.
Yeah, I
sure.
just ignored that. Sorry. Guys, it's terrible that we as humans have to study the world around us in order to understand it. Too bad there is not a God who knows everything and can tell us stuff like that, right? Too bad that we have to do the research on our own. So sad.
If only there was some useful stuff in that book. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on from that conversation and get closing thoughts in because we've got 2 more articles to get to, gentlemen. So what are your closing
Sure.
thoughts on the ethics of primate testing for neuroscience?
I think
Teo,
I'm
you want
going
to go
to.
first?
I don't have much to say. I think that if you hunt only one animal a year about the hunting, I think I wouldn't be as oppressed or sorry, as against us hunting as I am, because I usually see people who say, "I'm bored. I'm going to go and kill some birds on the countryside," and they kill animals for fun, and I despise that.
Okay, hunting for sport is fucking sadistic and evil.
Yeah.
I love that both of us totally agree on that. Yeah, and I see the same for fishing. About fishing, people fish for fun, not because they
Oh,
want
and
to eat fish
catch and
or they
release
need
is
to.
probably one of the most evil, like, well, not most evil. I'm not gonna put it that high up on the scale, but that's pretty damn bad.
In here,
It's
catch and
mean.
release doesn't exist.
It's
They
mean.
just catch the
Mean.
fish
Yeah.
and let it die, and that's it. And they do it for fun, and I really disagree with those.
They don't kill the fish, but they injure the fish. It's
Yeah.
mean.
And it causes them pain.
It must hurt a
Absolutely.
lot.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This article, sorry if I
No, go ahead.
do I get a quick second? Okay. Cuz this whole article reminded me of the trolley problem. If you guys I don't know if you guys know heard of the
Yes.
trolley problem where, there's a train headed down a track towards 5 people and you're at the switch, and if you flip the switch, the train goes down a different track and kills one person.
Mhm.
And it's kind of an ethical dilemma. Well, do you flip the switch? So it's like, well, if a train was headed at 1,000 people with Parkinson's and you could flip that switch to 100
100
tortured
primates.
monkeys,
Yeah.
yeah, would you do that? I mean, I don't know that I would.
Yeah, I
That's a
love how
tough one.
the analogy that you use there. I think that's an appropriate analogy. Yeah, it's very difficult because we want to minimize suffering overall, and obviously, like all of us are at least a little bit speciesist, and so we're like, well, you know, let's definitely see the human suffering to the highest extent that we can. But when we do so at the extent or at the expense of another creature, what are the ramifications of that ethically? And I like what you had to contribute to that conversation, Nate. I really appreciate it. But
Thank you for having me.
we
Yeah.
are yes. And we are gonna move on now